What happens when two chiropractic physicians walk into a bar? You're about to find out. Dr. Dragelin, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much for having me.
Man, let's go through it. Let's first start out. One of the most important things about this show to me is bringing awareness to our local charities that have done so great for so many. Tell me a little bit about the charity that you're toasting to tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and grab my glass if you grab yours for sure. So the charity that I am supporting tonight is Hands On Nashville. I am a resident of East Nashville, and obviously if you're in the Nashville area, the greater Nashville area, you're familiar with the tornado that came through and hit our neighborhood back in March. And Hands On Nashville was a really huge part in the relief efforts for many of my neighbors and friends. And unfortunately, with the onset of COVID-19, a lot of the volunteer relief efforts for the tornado were having to be put on hold. And so for that reason, I decided that I would support the Spine and Joint Center for being able to match that donation.
Yes, and that is something we're really excited to say, and to back up exactly what Dr. Dragelin says, that Spine Joint Center will be matching that donation today for Hands On Nashville, and so much that they've done for our community, especially around the tornado efforts. And it's so nice now that 3 weeks in a row we've had three great different local charities to be able to talk about and be able to sponsor. Let's first start out with what are you drinking tonight, my man?
Oh, so glad you asked. So this drink has become one of my recent favorites, especially as it's gotten warmer. It is a mojito, okay, crafted by yours truly. Jason, you and I, one of the first things that we bonded over actually was our mutual appreciation for bourbons and whiskeys. And but over the last couple months, I kind of started trying to explore a little bit of the rum game here. And so mojito, mint and lime, it's a great combination, very refreshing. I added a little sprig of mint here at the top to feel a little fancy. So
well done,
that's
sir.
what I'll be sipping on. Thank you.
Well done. Yeah, I'm going Heaven's Door tonight. And nice little Tennessee whiskey. Big fan. Yeah. Alan Bickmer, he's got some Four Roses small batch going right now.
There you go.
Man, we got it going this evening. Sounds
really
good.
Let's go. More want to hear what else everybody's got going.
No doubt. I think that's something really exciting that I hope everybody's been able to appreciate, that anytime you like or share the show, there is actually a visual representation on the screen. That's something we think is really cool, and we're pretty pumped about. Man, let's first rehash the last couple of weeks. We've had some really great guests, and if we talk about, I want to start with Dr. Lynn. When she was on, she had a lot of really great insight. She works in the ER. She is direct primary care physician, and the real topic that we ended up coming together on was this idea of loss of routine. And, this pandemic has been something for everybody. And the reality is we don't want to get into, new topics that haven't been covered before. But at the same time, I think it is important for us to step back and be able to share the human element of how that's affected us. I wanted to first start off with, what did you think about anything maybe that you heard from Dr. Lynn that maybe resonated with you, or just where your head went during that conversation?
Yeah, totally. That whole segment, I feel like, was just really awesome for me to hear how other people have had similar experiences over the last couple months. For me personally, as somebody who's constantly on the go, relatively extroverted, and spends a lot of time not only in clinic seeing patients, but then also interacting with other people, after hours, so to speak. The whole pandemic has been a challenge for me, I think, in a lot of different ways. One of the big ways that I feel like my routine has been thrown off is just with sleep quality. And so that's been huge for me. I mean, there was a stretch of, almost a month there where I was consistently waking up at 2:59 on the dot every single morning, and not being able to go back to bed. And I think a lot of that has been a result of, number one, the routines in general being thrown off. Number two, not having an outlet for as much energy as I'm typically expending. And so I think combination of that's been a big thing for me. And I've talked to a lot of other folks who have shared similar experiences.
And I think that is something interesting that, you realize there's like, we have several close friends and colleagues that have represented on Facebook and such, that they're introverts and their life hasn't changed that much. But then there's the exact
Right.
opposite side of the spectrum where it's been really thrown off, especially the social aspect, which is so important to us. What else went through your head when in that Dr. Lynn talk?
Yeah, I think another thing is just kind of thinking about how patients are, in particular, our patients are dealing with those situations as well, and seeing that the idea of maintaining a consistent routine is truthfully one of the best things that we can do, to maintain some semblance of normalcy in a time that's pretty unsure. And so making sure that you have good support network, that you're at least being able to reach out to those, whether it's on Zoom or FaceTime or something like that, and being able to actually have those person to person, so to speak, interactions is really, really valuable. And then also making sure that you maintain that routine. So if you're somebody who is used to waking up early, but now that you're not having to go into work, you don't have to wake up early. It's still important that we try to maintain those routines, because we know that habits take time to form and they also take time to break. And so messing up with that can be a big struggle. And we've seen that a lot in our clinic as well.
Yeah, I also wanted to say another cheers to Dr. Lynn. She actually won the Main Street Awards for Best Physician in Sumner County. So cheers, Dr.
Hey,
Lynn. I
that's
think
good, Dr. Len. Awesome job.
that is awesome. I think another thing that came out of that to me that was really interesting was that, everybody in healthcare feels this a little bit differently. And the community, we feel it differently, and we have different exposure to different parts of the community. One thing that came out in that conversation was that in her ER side, she's seeing such a decrease in activity. But at the same
Right.
time, when we look at Active Spine and Joint Center, they've seen a whole lot of uptick in running related or overuse type injuries because people are out of their routine from maybe going to the gym as an avid CrossFitter like yourself, that you go from this period where I'm used to being in a box, but now I might as well go hit the pavement. Well,
Right.
in that scenario, we're seeing an uptick in those. And I thought that was very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think like you said, it all depends on your sample size, right? Or the population that is actually being presented to you. And so clearly as musculoskeletal providers in the area, we're seeing the side of the spectrum that is the increase in activity, because now all of a sudden there's all this free time. And so folks are having the ability and the time to actually go do stuff more outside. The weather's getting nicer, et cetera. And so with that, we've seen a huge uptick in different lower extremity complaints or leg complaints, whether that's plantar fasciitis or knee pain or heel pain with running, all of those things. I mean, you can literally look at the calendar on our schedule and pinpoint like that week at the end of March, early April, where those things started shooting up. It was pretty crazy to kind of see how that influx has happened.
And I think something else interesting is, we just talked about how Dr. Lynn's going to see in her direct primary care practice or in the ER, and then Active Spine and Joint Center seeing a whole lot more of these individual tendon or just lower extremity or lower body pain complaints.
Yeah.
What's very interesting is you and I are in the same practice, but
Yeah.
because I've been on such a telehealth side and you've
Right.
been in the trenches with the acute cases, we've actually even seen another split and a drastically different patient population and type of injury and case management. And I think that takes us right into last week's episode with Dr. Kindred. And
Right.
I thought something that was really great to get out there that I just don't know that we could get on a big enough hill to bang a big enough drum to talk or to explain how important it is, some of these myths that are really challenging in the fitness world or in the health or medical world. And the big one we talked about was knee arthritis. And I really like the way that Jeff put that there are cases where you've had some really bad previous knee traumas, like real traumas that have led to a different type of arthritis that sometimes gets pinned into the same category. And maybe they struggle with running, but running, that myth that really brewed in the 70s, 80s, that running is what's trashing people's knees, really needs to die. And that's something that we've been for over 11 years, been banging that drum on, and science has come along so far, but it takes so long for that to be common knowledge. And I think that was something really great. What did you think about that, or what did you get out of Dr. Kindred's talk?
Gosh, I mean, I loved that talk. I mean, I feel like that message, like you said, it can't be said enough. And as someone who has a history of running, and running is one of my passions, as well as just fitness overall, I think it's, it's something that kind of makes me, like, in some ways, like, just sad. In other ways, I get upset about when someone says, like, oh, hey, I stopped running because I felt like it was bad for my knees. And, for me, I'm like, okay, if you stopped running because you just didn't like running, okay, that's fine,
Yeah.
but I would just hate if you really loved it to then stop because we had a fear, or we had some knee pain with running, etc. Which, don't get me wrong, can be pretty bad as someone who suffered from that myself. But then to have the notion of like feeling like the running is causing any kind of wear and tear on the knees or anything like that. And we now just know that that's not the case. That's not what happens. And in many cases, it actually has a protective effect on osteoarthritis as well. And so, I loved just seeing that and hearing that from another provider who we love and respect so much. It's just encouraging when that other members of the medical community are at least we're speaking the same language, and we're on the same page with some of those things.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for so many because how they were taught maybe in school is not exactly the updated science, and it's really hard for everybody to keep up in their respective fields, and that's why
Absolutely.
Having taught on the circuit for continuing education for physical therapists, chiros, and MDs for so long now, it actually really is helpful because we have to keep up with that, and that's actually one of the ways I initially met you and started recruiting you so long ago. I really want to get into, let's take that a little bit further and go into the running. And, one thing that's really important to think about running, and let's just talk about ultra marathons, because somebody had brought up a comment about that. But with an ultra marathon, okay, the average age of someone to complete an ultra marathon, so that's over 23 miles, that's 30 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles plus, is 43 is the average age. So 43-year-old's the average age that's going to complete an ultra marathon. But Dr. Dragelin last year, I don't know what happened, decided this is the time to do an ultramarathon. Take me down that road a little bit, because I think people would really like to hear someone who's used to lifting, working out, being a fitness coach for so long, and also decides, I guess I'm going to do an ultramarathon.
Yeah. So I will first say that big shout out to my mom here on this one, who is watching the show. I hope she is. She said she was going to be. Who's watching this? Who's pretty much my inspiration for my running to begin with. She has completed, I believe, 22 marathons herself. And so seeing that and growing up, I often tell people that I ran before I walked, because she would go on 10-mile runs a day with me in the stroller before I was even able to walk on my own. And so kind of seeing that progression, I, being the competitor myself, saw her running those 22 marathons and realized I probably wouldn't get to that number myself, but maybe I could beat her with a longer distance. So that was kind of where the seed started planting. But then from there, just like any other good story starts, it really begins with a margarita. Where my good buddy, one of my best friends, Wes, and I decided over a few drinks in Miami that we wanted to do a ultra marathon together. And so we, right there at a Mexican joint, just pulled out our phones and we registered on the spot for this 50-miler that was about a year later into it. And so from there kind of began a journey of, I trained for a marathon between that time and the actual ultra. And then post-marathon kind of continued my training a little bit until the point where I was, quote unquote, ready to run an ultra, which I don't think you actually ever are.
Yeah, it's fantastic. When you actually ran the race, I wanted to talk a touch of facial hair and then get into your costume for the race. But number one, I tried to keep up with this pandemic facial hair that you're running, but I realized real quick I need to quit because I can't keep up. I did my best, but it's got to go tomorrow. But
I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, take me through. Tell everybody a little bit about the costume for the race.
Oh yeah, so definitely. So every race, I kind of started a tradition with my first marathon right out of college that I would just shave down to a mustache. Would grow out a beard, shave down to a mustache, in really kind of to channel my inner Steve Prefontaine. So that's really where that came from. And it sort of just stuck with me as like a tradition. And then doing that for my ultra was obviously Prefontaine was not an ultra runner. However, I bet he still would have beat me in an ultra. So trying to kind of channel my inner Fontaine there.
One of the main reasons I really wanted to talk about this topic and you doing the ultra and then bringing up the average age to make people aware that the average age of actually running something beyond 26 miles is actually 43 years old is because that same topic we talked about with Dr. Kindred and they're running and trashing your knees. Think logically a little bit. If that was the case, you wouldn't see the average age being that. And then over 10% of all participants are over the age of 60. So in those cases, that I think that's a really good anecdote and a good stat to be able to look at some of these races and see what the statistics actually tell us. And it's that we can actually do these things. But I think what was really fun to hear in the last couple of conversations we had, we touched on the topic of how do you do this? How could someone do this? And how could they start to run? Because if your routines are way off, we're seeing at Active Spine and Joint Center an uptick in running related type injuries. Well, let's step back for a second and say, what are some options to maybe not experience those? Or the ones that are doing it successfully, what are some of the things that we're seeing or you're seeing at the clinic and the ones that are doing really well that we're just hearing anecdotes or following up with to just see how they're doing during the pandemic?
Totally. I mean, I think all of those are great thoughts and questions. The first being is that I think if we start on one side of the spectrum of, hey, if your running age, AKA the amount of time that you have under you of being a runner is relatively low, like closer to that 0 mark than any other number. The first thing that we should start with is just consistency with walking, right? I know that a lot of folks that we see in our clinic who are avid runners now have began their journey by starting off as just walking for a while. And there are members of the community who do that as well. I know, Jason, you've actually been kind of hitting the miles pretty aggressively here on the feet and doing it right, may I add. And so I definitely commend you for that, of just saying, hey, I'm going to start off this base of putting in the miles on the feet. And there is nothing to scoff at from a walking standpoint, because you can get in some really amazing fitness gains, as well as most importantly, road time gains by just starting off walking, right? So if you're kind of closer to that side of the spectrum of not familiar with running or don't have much experience with it, that's absolutely where we should start. And I think the other thing, just to get this out there, is that everything takes more time than you think it's going to, right? And the most crucial thing is building up a solid, consistent base for about 3 months before we embark in any kind of training endeavor. So to put this in perspective, obviously a lot of races right now are canceled. For example, whether it's half marathons, 5Ks, ultras, whatever, a lot of things are being canceled or postponed. But if you're somebody who's wanting to maybe put that on the calendar, it's a really good idea to try to establish a consistent base for about 3 months before we even embark on any kind of training regimen or plan or anything like that. Actually, Jason, it was you that first discussed with me, and I felt it personally in a very real way about the concept of the 48-hour rule, right, in between sessions for running, where we take basically a day on and then we wait another 48 hours for our body to fully heal and recover before we get after it again. And I can't stress that enough as being just a great rule of thumb to making sure that we don't overtrain. We don't do, as Dr. Kindred said last week, too much too soon, which is ultimately where a lot of the running related injuries that we see come from. It's not, wear and tear on the knees or anything like that, but it is 100 times out of 100 too much too soon.
I think that's what's really, really challenging for everyone as well. So mentally, competitively, that spirit of the competitor is, I got shit to do, let's go. And I'm going to get it in. I'm going to get the miles in. And that same mindset is what makes a really great athlete with a strong base. If you have that strong base, they're going to absolutely crush it and do a great job having that mindset. Having to have a family and work for a living, all these other aspects, low sleep, and then say, you know what, dadgummit, today's the day. I'm back on the horse. I'm getting in 3 miles today. Is too much too soon on the tendons all the time. And we do use that a lot of times to try to help educate those that overdo it, to try to put some numbers to it. And sometimes people enjoy the science side, some people really don't, but it does help sometimes to understand that start slowly, adapt, make progress. And what you explained was a rule of thumb for people that are new to the activity, and they'll say, oh my gosh, 2 days off, that sounds dramatic. And at first that may be the case, but as you build up your base over time, your body can tolerate way more, and you can do far more, and that's how you achieve. But the key thing is that slow consistency is way easier than tripping off some tendon pain, a tendonitis, or some bone pain, and then now having to try to backpedal through that. That makes it really, really tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the big thing there is kind of recognizing too that it's always easier to prevent these kind of injuries than it is to fix them on the back end, right? And we see that all the time, that once something's tripped off, it's a long journey to recovery oftentimes, and it can kind of come out of nowhere. So smart training beats hard training all of the time. And if you don't have a coach and you want a coach, there are plenty of resources there. And I don't know, maybe we can even drop something in the comments of some local coaches at some point that we recommend, especially in the Sumner County area. So
absolutely. Allison Canby said, she said, you're right. Every good running story starts with a drink.
Yeah, it is. I love it, Allison. Thanks.
No doubt. Sarah had a question. She said, how important is the right shoe? So this topic is absolutely fantastic because it could get real nerdy or real simple. Which one do you want to take? You want to take the nerdy or the simple?
Gosh.
I'll just drink.
In terms of,
you pick and then I'll take the other.
I guess the question ends up being it is and it isn't, right? Everybody has their own unique biomechanical strengths, and then the things that also predispose them to injury as well. Very few, only the most elite athletes at times are the ones who, we can basically look at and say, man, I wouldn't change a thing on you, And so from that standpoint, oftentimes footwear can be an advantage to us. And it can also be one of those things where we can spend too much time being concerned about it as well. And so the big thing I would say is that if you don't have an issue, not an issue right now, right? But if you do have an issue, it could be something that we look at, that we address. However, I think you would agree with this, Jason, is that only in certain special circumstances is footwear the actual solution to the problem. It's not that necessarily we're deficient in the right shoe, but most often than not, we can actually pinpoint something that's either maybe a mobility or a strength issue, or something that's just a training error issue. And so I'd say that in hierarchy of running related injuries specifically, you have training error, training volume problems at number one, and then number 2 and 3 are those mobility issues. So if those things are on point, then we can be pretty confident that most likely the shoes will be okay.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it, as one of our close colleagues, Greg Cook, would put it, is that, a Tempur-Pedic mattress and a really cushy shoe can hide a whole lot of issues and allow you to do a lot of things that are probably going to get you into trouble. And I think that's the big thing. And I think there's a right time and a right place, and we can get real nerdy about it, meaning we have an OptiGate in our office, which is one of the best timing machines on the planet to be able to do gait analysis. Costs well over $10,000 to do an assessment, to get the equipment to be able to do this type of assessment that's done at the Olympic Training Facility, etc. But to step back, we did a whole lot of those assessments early on, and we were doing them for almost everyone who would call and ask and say, hey, I want a 3D gait analysis. I want the best running analysis you can have. Give me that. What do I got to do? And we said, come on in. And what really started to come out of the data was very, very interesting. We found that they're really great runners. They also said this shoe seems to be the most comfortable. And then what happened about 10 years ago, kept coming out in the research, is that for most people, the right shoe, believe it or not, ends up being the one that they put on, and it just feels right. And like, God, this feels good. And it's that comfortable shoe ends up being and correlates almost all the time with the right shoe for them. But there are certain issues, for example, about if they have like a really acute lower foot pain, they may need that cushier shoe temporarily. to be able, and that's something we do at Action Spine Joint Center all the time, is we're trying to get them better and get them stronger and keep them active. And that's why it's called Active Spine and Joint Centers, because we're very passionate about our community fighting chronic disease by staying as active as possible. We'd always trade a muscle, joint, nerve, or tendon pain issue for a chronic disease that's hard to unravel, right? So let's stay active and do what we can. But with that cushier shoe, rule of thumb, typically if it's below the ankle, it's going to be a little bit better. But if it's not, if the pain's a little higher, we actually may need that more responsive shoe to send those biomechanical forces, down at the foot a little bit more, as opposed to sending them up a little higher. And the key is that regardless, you're smacking the ground, right? And when you're hitting the ground, things are happening, and that's how you're producing energy. But that force has got to go somewhere regardless. There's even we can get real nerdy about it with some of the research out of Andy recently, et cetera. But I think that really boils it down exactly like you said. I mean, I think you said it really, really well. And the only thing to add to it is there is a time to get really nerdy about a really great gait analysis. And I think that number one and number two time to do that is if you're really down with two really comfortable shoes and you want to know performance wise which one's the most efficient for you, I think we can give you a pretty dadgum good answer on that. And if you wanted to see if you are having some asymmetries that maybe you need to train into based on your body or something like that, I think we can give you some pretty good data and say, here's what we're seeing. Let's maybe make an adaptation or some training, and now let's rerun you and see if it made that change we're looking for. And are you seeing that with your coach or in your numbers on your Garmin that you want to see? So I think that's a really good tidbit there.
Yeah, love that. That's really great. Really great. I love that bit about that the right shoe just most of the time is the one that feels the best. Right? It's so simple, but it's helpful when you're actually in the store and you're like, oh my God, there's 100 different shoes here. Which one do I choose? Yes. And to kind of have that peace of mind there. Yeah, it's great.
Great rule of thumb. First statement we had is Rob Canvey said that the older you are, the better you are able to handle suffering. What a good one.
Oh, wow.
We need to put that on a wall.
I love that.
That's what needs to happen down in the rehab bay.
I think
that's
so.
A good one.
Man, I'll tell you what, I see that all the time. I mean, I feel like every single day we're just being blown away by some of our patients who are defying the norms of expectation for what they should be doing at their age. I mean, we're seeing that in a really, really good way.
I think it's great.
And definitely, I mean, I guess the older you get, the tougher you get, which is good news for me because I don't consider myself to be particularly tough. So I guess I got some room for improvement.
Alan wanted to know, is training volume important? So let's answer that question in terms of a specific endeavor. And I think that's what's going to be important here. Let's talk about it in terms of an ultra marathon. Is training volume important? Is there a place that you just got to get in the miles, or do you just need to be a good athlete?
Wow. That's a great question, Alan. Thanks for asking that. We talk about this a lot, and I've talked about this with a few running coaches in the area as well, is that different runners have a different sweet spot of mileage for where their body is going to do the best. However, just plain and simple, I mean, if you're training for an ultra marathon, there really isn't a substitute for time on your feet, for volume. I mean, the fact of the matter is if you got 50 miles ahead of you one day, like, you got to be able to run 50 miles. And I don't know what to tell you. It's like, there's not much more that you can do other than putting in the time. The key thing is, though, is just making sure that we build in enough time calendar-wise, expectation-wise, to be able to do that effectively and also safely. I mean, that's the biggest thing. We were actually talking about this the other day, is that, if you do, for example, for when I was training for my ultra, I got injured about 5 weeks out from the race, to where anything over a mile, I mean, I had to shut it down. I literally could not make it more than a mile. And with 5 weeks left, I basically committed that I was going to do it. But then we kind of put our heads together to build up basically a backup plan, which was I was not going to sit down from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. I was going to strength train really crazy, and I was going to walk to the best of my ability, just walk. And for 5 weeks leading up to my ultra, I did not run a single step. I stood, I walked, and I strength trained. And come actual race time, those first 13 miles were pretty miserable. My leg felt really bad. And then I don't know, something happened at mile 14. I don't know if my legs were hurting, my thighs were hurting more than my knee was, or what it was. But it ended up basically taking care of itself, and I was fine the rest of the race. But all that to say that there is no substitute for consistent, good, solid training. But sometimes we can come up with a backup option if that's not working.
And that's the heart of sports medicine, right?
Yeah.
It's that subpar medical situation where we can use the best of our knowledge, our what we like to call that Bayesian inference, that looking at all the cases over the years and put them together and say what's going to be the best thing for you in this moment right now, and use the science and everything that we're seeing. And I think that's something that makes it really fun in clinical practice to be able to help people. Dana Felice, though, man, just drops a bomb. We can just pour one out, is that Boston Marathon officially canceled today. Did not know that. I knew they relocated until September. I did not know that they canceled that. To go back on a positive note, your mom said hi, and Dr. Coghill's mom said hi. So very cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to say about the volume is exactly what you said, is that at some point you just got to get it in, but you also got to be smart. And one of the things that we use all the time, and I promise will only be 60 seconds of super nerdy information, but when we study what happens to the human body when we put impact into the ground, there are numbers and really smart mathematicians that calculate how much of that force comes into the body. And one of the metrics they use all the time is what's called, it's percent of body weight. So if I weigh 100 pounds and I pound the pavement, how much percentage of that force is coming into each body part, my ankle, my knee, my hip. So wherever that injury can be, we can then say, what can we make better around that to make that less? So for example, there are certain areas in the shin that the calf, believe it or not, is going to have over 9 times our body weight of force that's going through it at any given moment. So if you are having bone stress, that's a problem if it's in that area, because you just can't run that amount of calf pull. But in certain cases, we can then say, look, you may not be able to run because that's 9 times your body weight through that area all the time, but you can walk and don't feel it. Well, we know that that's somewhere between 2.5 to 4 times your body weight through there. So if you're good at 4, but not good at 9, guess what we're going to do a heck of a lot of? A heck of a lot of 4. And you're a great testament to that, to be 5 weeks out, even though you did your training well, it was a little rushed. Right? Timeline was tight, but that happens. And that's where the best in conservative sports medicine can say, what's the best odds of you successfully doing this? And you absolutely crushed it. And I love that. And then the other piece that you'd said, you talked about the timeline, right? Setting that realistic expectation. And I think that's what's really challenging. A lot of the marathon plans or the half marathon or ultra plans that people will see, there's an assumed base there. There's an assumed that you have some fitness base, and most people will be like, I'm going couch to 300K. And it's like, honey, that is not how that works at all. We need to pump the brakes a little bit, have a little bit of a base, and then ease in, or have that expectation that something's going to go poorly, but maybe I do okay. Right. Exactly. And if that's the expectation, that's a lot different. But a lot of times that's their stress reliever. They're hanging everything on this one race, this date that they set, and they weren't prepped for. So our rule of thumb at Action Plan Joint Center has been for a long time now, is that if you're coming off an injury in the last year, we want you to add 4 to 6 weeks to that plan that you had set up or your coach had set up, so that you have that time or that variability as you need it. And I think that was a great point that you made about how important that is. And then to be able to express that, hey, guess what though? Sometimes we get in the weeds, and when that happens, you get the right healthcare provider and they can help you get past that. And I think that was really, really great.
Yeah.
Somebody had asked, what is your favorite endurance drink?
Ooh, good question.
If you don't have an endurance drink, so I'm not sure if you're an endurance drink guy, but also just know the next question, so try not to steal it, is going to be, what is the one thing on a race that you have to have? That it's a non-negotiable that you have to have.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so answer both. Endurance drink. I've been really liking Noon recently. NUUN. I just like how there's a caffeinated version and a non-caffeinated version in different flavors, and It's just they're tablets that you drop in the water, and they work really great for me. It's tough to, and sometimes I'll do just like water with Endurolite tablets for those longer efforts, but I just like the Nuun. I feel like it tastes good. It's light. It doesn't get overpowering or anything like that, which is really great. As well as Spring. I really like Spring Energy for like a goo or a gel. They do whole food gels that aren't like super sugary and stuff, and they don't make your stomach tear up, and you get the pre-race poops, which are pretty aggressive sometimes with those really sugary gels, and they're nice. It's basically, it's like an applesauce type situation in a couple different flavors, and those are great. But then the one thing that I can't do a race without, is that the question?
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. So a mustache is number one for sure. That would probably be number one. Number two would be, I always write with Sharpie on my arm, Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2, which is a verse in the Bible that talks about running with endurance. And so that's sort of like my inspiration. I write that in Sharpie on my arm, and kind of when you're at mile 20 and you hit a hill, it gives you a little bit of that emotional boost to kind of get up that hill. So I'd say those are probably like those are my top two, a mustache and a Bible verse, which are, those are kind of the two things that I hold on to. So.
No, they're powerful. Aaron Lee asks, what's your favorite pump up song? So I think this is a good discussion. Is, as a runner, so certain races,
Yes.
We've been the medical director for the Hendersonville Half Marathon now for several years, and certain races on that committee, one thing that was very obvious is that there's a big difference between certain races that say you can't listen to music, and then some that just give that like heavy nudge of, please don't wear headphones, but you still can. And then some say it's completely fine. So in that context, are you more of I have to have a certain music and a certain cadence kind of guy? I'm a certain artist guy. Can you do a podcast or an audio book? Where are you at?
Oh yeah. So long runs, without a race, long runs, I typically do a podcast or something like that, especially if it's a trail run. But going into actual race day, gosh, there are a lot of songs. I will flip from like everything from DMX to like techno music to everything. I got to have a mixture of a whole lot of different things. Number one best pump up song. I don't even know if I have that. That's a really good question. I'm gonna have to think about that one a little.
I think it's a great song because it's something I've struggled with dramatically, and that because of the amount of time I've been on my feet because I get up 4:30 a.m. I'm out there for at least 2.5 hours every day. And what I realized is I was over music way faster than I thought.
Yeah.
It's just, as much as music is so disposable content wise, Spotify, etc., I was over it. So what's been wild is I've gotten through more nonfiction books in the last 9 weeks than I've gotten through since my girls have been born. So that's audiobook. I am an Audible addict over here. Just crushing books at this point, because you don't think about it, but my gosh, if you're out there that early, daughters normally get up and start bugging my wife at like 6:30 or so. So I try to, sneak out to like 7:15 still and act like I got lost, but I'm still getting through the book or whatever. But my gosh, you're getting through like a book every 3 days. So with that kind of volume and time, you can really get through a whole lot of books. So that's been something that has been enjoyable to me, because I'm a way better audiobook guy than I am a sit down and read guy, especially when priorities of helping patients and then getting to see my wife, getting to see my family. It's hard to juggle to then say I'm going to crush a few nonfiction books. So to be able to combine those before they get up and then just over caffeinate the rest of the day has worked out pretty good lately.
I love that. I think I got my answer though. I think one of my number one go-tos would be like All of the Lights by Kanye West. I feel like that's probably one of my go-tos. It's on most of my playlists, most of my race playlists. I'd say it's a pretty consistent.
Yeah, go-to. Kanye's pretty easy to sneak in there.
Yeah, he's easy to throw in there for sure.
Yep. Ethan said his favorite pump up song is "In the Club" by T-Pain.
Nice. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's good.
I feel like we
That's
need to
good.
print something out and put it on his desk.
Yeah, I think so. Love that. Speaking of T-Pain, I'd say that I would be remiss if I didn't tell this, that a lot of people have asked what the hardest or the worst part of the ultra marathon was, when I did it, as just kind of almost like a bucket list type of item. And it wasn't necessarily the fact that like I was out there for 12 hours or that my knee was killing me or that I at one point had a dehydration scare, but it was that I had Buy You a Drink by T-Pain stuck in my head the entire time. Every single step, I was just like, it was just Buy You a Drink. And it was just for 12 hours, like broken record. Every single mile I was just like, I found myself singing it. And that was, I think, probably the most miserable part of the entire experience.
Yeah, that's pretty unbelievable. That's, to me, is not even in my category of like top 5 earworms to think of. Like, I'm going to get Baby Shark stuck in my head way harder than I'm going to get a T-Pain track stuck in my head. So that could be pretty miserable. I've given in to the Disney tracks are just part of my life now. It's just who I am. So I have no issues with Jeep doors off and just blaring a little Moana. Like, I feel pretty good about it at this point.
Yeah.
Alan Bickmer said that music would drive him crazy on a long endurance endeavor, and that just the simulation alone is good enough for him. I'll say that has been interesting too. On if you're going from the walking perspective, a couple hours into the walk, sometimes it is really nice to say that, like, I'm just going to turn it off and let's just enjoy nature for a minute. But I have been very interested to realize that I don't want that all the time, though. So I was talking to Dr. Kindred last week, and he had talked about the safety element of having on the bike that he has basically this awareness alarm that says this is how close they are, how fast they're going. It gives him good data on that. That jumped into my head right away. Even though walking, I'm walking in the direction of oncoming traffic, or I'm running in the direction of oncoming traffic. So I get a pretty good heads up. But I actually went ahead and just took the dive and got some headphones that have good playthrough so I can still hear the outside. And I thought that was a really, really great item to have because that extra safety feature. But I realized real quick, I got to turn those birds off. Those birds are loud, bro. So I have to mute the outdoors there for a little bit, get in my groove. But then I'm like, I just don't think I can listen to this guy read this book anymore. So I'll turn that off as well.
Yeah, I've got these. I've been really liking these. These are like an Aftershocks. They're bone conduction headphones, and I actually got these for that exact reason, for the safety element as well. Also, I feel like not cars are one thing for sure, and they're definitely a threat. But what's even more of a threat are the squirrels that jump out at you, or if you startle the squirrels and they do this like little rustle in the leaves thing. And I mean, literally nothing gives you more of a panic attack than being in your own world and then feeling this like rustle in the bushes or the leaves, like right there. You're like, I'm about to die. There's a snake or a person or something's about to attack me. And so I've found that with those, I'm just a little bit more aware of my surroundings. It's really helpful.
I swore you were going to go bear, but you went squirrels. So squirrels.
Yeah. And I mean,
well, guess what doesn't affect me in the burbs here on the road at 4:30 a.m. I got no squirrel action happening down the Indian Lake Peninsula, but I do have quite a bit of the deer are just so desensitized to anything Jason related. I mean, I'll be going down the road and this deer's like 4 feet away. I took a picture the first walk out and I was like, honey, there was a deer 20 feet away. I just can't believe it. This morning, 4 feet away, this female deer just sits there and looks at me and it's just not moving. I'm like, I guess you're going to run away. No, I'm in her space.
Yeah.
That's enough. Crazy. Hey, everybody, right now, if you go to the Two Docs page, you've got to see the picture of Dr. Dragelin. He is in his ultramarathon attire. Like and share that bad boy. That's a must-see. I meant to have that queued up. Instead, I came out with a couple good running memes that were good. I really like the one about the as a non-runner addressing the knee pain scenario. I always think that's a really, really good meme. I really am a big fan of almost all of the running memes. They really do something for me that really makes me really excited. They're really, really funny. I love the one too that with Kermit and then Hoodie Kermit and he's talking about like, yeah, you need to get a long run in, but you know what? A race is kind of like a long run, so you might as well go ahead and sign up for another race. I love that one too. I love those.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, they kind of they tug at a certain part of your heart, you know.
Yeah. Dana had said that, what would be nice is if we could just put down 5 to 10 more really good parks to run in. I don't know. I mean, I get that. I think that would be cool. I really enjoy just how much of our Nashville community is so beautiful to run in. Even if you have to be on the road, just the positive is get out early. I think that's the big thing, and that's how you can do that. Everybody, I want to thank you for joining the show today. Dr. Dragelin, great job. Can't wait to have you back on again soon. We have so many more topics to digest and get through.
So many.
I appreciate all of your time today. Keep doing a great job, and then we'll see you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Cheers.